Yeah, so if you can make a request about if people want any change in tempo or depth.
I'll make. I'll just let them know when
Sure.
we start. Shri Gurubhyo Namah. Welcome back to the second session of this weekend's Weekend with Wisdom with Dr. N. Sivasenani ji. And he will again take up the topic of Sphotavada, the philosophy of Vyakarana. And in the morning session, he gave a very introduction to the topic. And now he'll be taking each strand and going into more depth of it. And with these opening remarks, let us begin with a small prayer. Vakratunda Mahakaya Koti Surya Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Sarvamangala Mangalye Shive Sarvartha Sadike Sharanye Trayambake Gauri Narayani Namostute Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Dr. Sivasenani ji, welcome back. Please go ahead and start the session.
Thank you, Nitinji. I have one request for the audience. If you want any change in depth or tempo, please let me know through the chat. And I mean, for this session, I cannot change the content as such, but tomorrow I can change, but I can still on the run vary the treatment. So that is one request. Meanwhile, let me share my screen and start. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, thank you. So in the first session, we covered two parts, which is introduction to Sphotavada as a whole, as to what the key concepts are, the foundational concepts of Shabda Nityatva, Shabda Artha and their Sambandha. And we also went into some discussion of the ultimate entity Brahman and the view of Vyakarana on what Brahman is, what Jati and Dravya are, and how Brahman is with relation to those, the various Shaktis of Brahman, and how the view of Jagat being a vivarta of Shabda is held by Vyakaranas. In today's session, we'll cover two more parts. One is on Spota proper. The next one is on Varna, Pada, and Vakya. With that, let me start the part on Spota. As in the earlier session, after 45 minutes, we'll take a 10-minute break and come back. After the second session, we'll take any questions that appear in the chat. In the third part, we'll cover the overview of Spota, different types of Spota, Spota versus Varnavada, and Upasamhara. I'm sorry about a mistake. It's written as Varnavada, but it should be Varnavada. Let me start with overview of Spota. Many of you might be aware that there are 4 stages or levels of Shabda called Para, Paschanti, Madhyama, Vaikhari. This is held not only by Vyakaranas, but we also see that people who are into Shri Vidya or Shakteyas and some Kashmiri Shaivas, they also hold a similar kind of position. And this is a more common position that Shabda is at these levels. Vaikhari is our everyday ordinary speech. Madhyama is what exists in our buddhi as one without any temporal divisions. By temporal divisions, we mean divisions in time. It means we say some letter now, a letter later. When we say, for example, Gam, Anaya, Gam we initially pronounce, and then A, Na, Ya, they are pronounced a few nanoseconds later. This time-wise division is what we call as temporal division, and Madhyama exists in the buddhi without such temporal divisions. Pashyanti is a further higher level Shabda, which is discernible only to yogis, that ordinary mortals cannot even conceive of how Pashyanti is. But again, Pashyanti is what it's called Pashyanti because it can see. It can see the past, present, and future, etc. And finally, Para is the equivalent of Brahman. In fact, Bhartrhari is completely silent on this aspect. In the Upanishads, we have a concept called Bhuman. So Narada is asked by somebody as to what is this, what is higher than that, what is higher than that. Finally, there is complete silence. Why? We cannot describe Brahman. Our words do not suffice to do that. Similarly, Bhartrhari does not talk about Para, etc. He wrote a big treatise on Shabda, but he never mentioned Para, though he completely believes in these 4 stages. Now, this is a very simplistic communication model. Please pardon me if you think that hey, this is too simplistic. We are well aware of it. Bear with me. In a minute, we'll see how this leads us to the concept of Spota. On the left side, we have Vakta. On the right side, we have Shrota. And in the Vakta's buddhi, a particular entity flashes. Let's say he wants to communicate that he's thinking of a phalam. Then instructions are sent to Vak to utter the Shabda called phalam. The same is uttered, and the Shrota listens to that through his ear. And in the reverse process, after listening to the collection of Varnas called phalam, the Shrota thinks of, okay, what is intended here is a fruit. Right? In his buddhi, the same concept again comes, flashes. So this is the communication model used by Vyakarana. This seems very simplistic, right? Until we introduce one, what we call interpretation, or we really kind of show what it really means. That means in our mind, we have a concept to talk about, and that concept is now translated through our Vak. Now let us look at the opening shloka of Siddhanta Kaumudi. Bhattoji Dikshita, not the opening shloka. After the third Namaskara shloka is Munitrayam Namaskritya Daduktihi Paribhavyacha Vyakarana Siddhanta Kaumadiyam Virachyate. Right? So in his mind, there is something called Kaumudi, and it comes out as this book called Siddhanta Kaumudi. And we all listen to this, and we finally get the same understanding of Vyakarana as Bhattoji had in his mind. Now, look at this. Siddhanta Kaumudi is normally published in 4 volumes or sometimes even 8 volumes. That is only parts to it. It's a thick, fat book. Usually, it is published along with Balamanorama and one other commentary, or only with Balamanorama. We're talking about 4 or 8 volumes, right? But Bhattoji Dikshita, who is a grammarian, who knows how to use words, is saying, Vyakarana Siddhanta Kaumudi iyam virachyate. Iyam means this. This is at the beginning of the work. Now the question arises, where is this work? Right? Obviously, we cannot say that a Vyakarana like Dikshita, Bhattoji Dikshita does not know iyam means what is visible in front of him. Yet, that was the third shloka. We cannot accuse him of saying that, okay, you wrote the entire work and then as an appendix, you wrote the third one. No, we cannot do. Sishtas are not like that. Patanjali talks about Panini, saying that once Acharya says something, there is no taking it back. Right? Darbhapani, he with Darbha in his hand, faces the east and sits, and then he starts talking, and that is Shastra. That's it. Right? That being the case, this actually is a big discussion within Siddhanta Kaumudi's commentary. Where exactly was Siddhanta Kaumudi? It was there in his buddhi. If we think of an apple and say phalam, it seems simple, but our buddhi holds even an entire work like Kaumudi just in the way it holds an apple. This is the sophistication I'm talking about. Because when something is held in the mind, right, there is no differentiation there. This is the Madhyama part we're talking about. No temporal division. It is all one undivided thought. And then it starts flowing out through this. That's the reason why acharyas, once they start talking, it becomes Shastra. They don't have to look back and all that, because all of it has flashed in their mind. In fact, the word flash is the operative part. You would have heard of some great authors talking about their eureka moments. I was having coffee in so place, and suddenly this idea struck me. I took a napkin and jotted it down. That jotting down of the idea becomes a book. We call it Bija Rupa sometimes, right? But what is really happening is that the entire thought is available without being fully developed, so to speak. You're not aware of all the parts of that, but it is all there. That is what is called Madhyam. That is what is called Spota. It is called Spota because it is explosive. Sputyate means that it explodes, right? This entire thing comes like a flash. That's why I said flash is the operative word. It does not come bit by bit. Yet, whatever comes as a flash, as a single whole, gets expressed bit by bit, gets understood bit by bit, and the end of the understanding process is to recreate the same concept. This is the communication model of Vyakaranas, and that is the reason why Bhattoji Dikshita can very happily say, Iyam Vyakara Siddhanta Kaumudi, because it is already there as far as he is concerned. He can see it in his buddhi. Therefore, there is no problem with this word Iyam in the Namaskara Shloka of Kaumudi, and it also indirectly indicates the Siddhantic position of Dikshita. And this is a this is a pointer for us for the communication model of Vyakaranas. So, if I have to explain it in simpler words, first the speaker has in his mind some object to communicate. At this stage, this is called Spota. There is no order of Varnas, etc. Then the speaker chooses the appropriate Vaikhari sounds to illuminate this Spota. The word uses illuminate. That means, imagine Spota has to be one object which we cannot see, the Shrota cannot see, but as soon as somebody starts speaking, the act of speaking throws light on one part of it, right? And then the Vaikhari sound is heard by the listener. It again triggers the exact object that the speaker has in mind. So this is, in Bhartrhari's own words, this is said in 147, that is Brahmakanda 47th Karika. In whatever meaning the Madhyama Shabda is fixed in the mind before pronunciation, the same sense is expressed by the Vaikhari Shabda produced by speech organs. Now there is a Sukshma here. What Bhartrhari is saying is that in whatever meaning Madhyama Shabda is fixed, right? The same will be expressed by the Vaikhari Shabda. Now we can say that, look, there are two words, Ghata and Pata. You are saying Madhyama of both is the same, right? So is it possible that the speaker thought of Madhyama, but the listener understood, Pata, though the Madhyama was Ghata in the speaker's mind? No. Why? In whatever meaning the Madhyama Shabda is fixed in the mind, the same sense is expressed by the Vaikhari Shabda. This mapping or translation is done by a person who has knowledge of those words. That's also the reason why if we experience something for which we have no words, we cannot communicate that. In that sense, a lot of Western philosophers says that language limits our ability to experience the world. Right? Now, if we get one anirvachaniya, what we call experience now, and we can't really explain that, right? Because we don't have words for it. Think of it this way. In Finland, they have, it is said, some 40 words for snow. In Telugu, where it hardly ever snows, and what snow we get is actually called, a hailstorm, right? What we call Vadagallavana in Telugu, for example. It is not really snow, but water falling down in hard form because it's too cold, right? We have limited word. We have maybe Hima, okay, and maybe Manchu, and maybe this Vadagallu. Beyond that, we'll not have. So we are not even aware of the various concepts of what happens like sleet, right? Or what happens when snow is not soft, when it is slippery. We don't even have words for it. We'll find it difficult to communicate. But since we are exposed to English and other things, we are able to understand this clearly. But imagine somebody without any of this exposure, or I can try an example. If you see a tundra, if I say tundra, do you understand what it is? Tundra. Tundra is a very cold desert. Those who know what tundra means will understand. If you don't know, this process of the sense of Madhyama being communicated, illuminated by Vaikhari, and whatever is illuminated by Vaikhari, turning back to Madhyama will not happen. That's why they say that your knowledge, your language is what limits your knowledge. So this is really the Spota model of, how it really works. This is how it works in communication. So Patanjali says very clearly, Spotaha, Shabdaha, Dhvanihi, Shabda Gunaha. What he's saying is, Spota is Shabda, while Dhvani is a quality of Shabda. This is Patanjali in the commentary on the Sutra, Taparas Tatkalasya, where we have the affix ta after that, like at, etc. What it really means is that we already defined Shabda earlier. Patanjali himself defined. We remember that it is a conceptual entity. Spota is that conceptual entity, whereas what we call as sound in English is called Dhvani, and that is just a quality of this. This Spota, it need not be manifest. It need not be pronounced. It's actually not at that time, right? Only one aspect of it is brought to light with Dhvani. Therefore, Patanjali gives two definitions for the level of Madhyama and Vaikhari. The first one we already saw, Enocharitena Sasna Langula Kapuda Visha Kapura Vishaninam Sampratyayo Bhavati Sashabdaha. That which conceptual entity which when pronounced causes cognition of object. That is what is Spota or Madhyama or Shabda as it is. Then he separately describes Dhvani as Athava Pratita Padarthako Loke Dhvanihi Shabdaha Ityuchyate. That's also called Shabda, but it really should be called as Dhvani. Pratita Padarthakaha means that which makes an object known. It makes an object's pratita go into our mind. Right? That's what is the Vaikhari Shabda or the Dhvanihi. Or a different way of defining Spota is Arthasya Vachakaha Spotaha. Very clearly, it is being said that whatever denotes Artha, that is what is Spota. Elsewhere, it is said that their Vyanjaka Bhava is there. But Madhyama by itself, Vaikhari by itself cannot give us the Artha. It is Madhyama which is really grasping that Artha, and it is the Vachaka of the Artha. All that Vaikhari is doing is that it is illuminating some parts of this undivided entity called Shabda. That's the reason why Shabda alone is the Vachaka of Artha. And when we normally say Shabda, it means Spota. But yes, Shabda can also be used for Dhvani. It is the same thing that we saw in the first part, right? That when we say sun rises in the east or silk is smooth, it's understood as to what they mean in the particular context. They can mean both of a very, what you call, everyday meaning or something very specific in the Shastra. So this is Spota. And if you look at types of Spota, right? This is actually not even from Vyakarana Grandhas, it is from commentary on the Pratishakyas. Pratishakyas, as you are aware, are proto-grammars or pre-Ashtadhyayi grammars on different Vedic shakhas. And they were really compilations of earlier discussions. What used to happen earlier was there would be some doubts. Hey, is this the way to do it? Is this the way to pronounce it? And whatever. So every few years, all the great Panditas will meet in a big parishad. And that parishad will hold all these discussions. And finally, the parishad will come to certain siddhanta or certain conclusions. And all of these, when codified, become the guidebook for that particular shakha. They become Pratishakya. The effect of this Pratishakyas is that if you look at the same mantra in Veda, let's say Purusha Suktam, or Shukla Yajurveda Rudram and Krishna Yajurveda Rudram, it is chanted differently in different parts of the country because in the parishads which happened in these areas, the Pandits considered all aspects and decided that this is the way we are going to do it going forward. That is how this difference is cropped up. At one time in BJP, there was this, there were two contenders for the post of finance minister. You might remember Jaswant Singh and Yashwant Sinha. What is interesting is that both of them are the same name, Yashwanta Simha in Sanskrit. In Bihar, that became Yashwant Sinha. Simha became Sinha. In Rajasthan, Ya became Ja. Jashwant Singh. Simha became Singh. This is how, and this is actually the effect of Pratisakyas. Okay, so these Pratisakyas have the rules where, for example, in Bengal we hear a lot of ba for va, because there they have a rule called vabayor abhedaha. Right? Elsewhere there's a rule called larayor abhedaha. La and ra are the same. That is the reason why lekha and rekha are the same, and chandralekha actually means chandrarekha, and so on. Right? Laghu, raghu, or both are exactly the same, light. These different rules have kind of evolved in different areas because of this Pratisakya. So it is not really a surprise that Spota's division is found in a commentary on Pratisakyas. Of course, we also find this being mentioned by Bhattoji Dikshita in his Tattva Kaustum, but and later even Kaunda Bhatta, etc. But it's really what I'm trying to say is that these concepts are not limited to one Shastra, but different Shastras have a similar kind of understanding, and this is accepted there. In this, Spota is divided first into Vyakti Spota and Jati Spota. Vyakti Spota is further divided into Sakhandaha, Akhandaha. Then we have within Sakhandaha three types: Varna, Pada, Vakya Spota. So it will be Sakhanda Varna Spota, Sakhanda Pada Spota, Sakhanda Vakya Spota. And in Akhanda we have only Pada and Vakya, because Varna cannot be Akhanda, it is the lowest unit. In the Jati Spota, similarly, we will find the division into Varna, Pada and Jati. Overall, you will find 8 kinds of Spotas. I will not go into depth of each one of them because that's really beyond the scope of this series. But remember, Spota means Vachakaha. Therefore, Sakhanda Varna Spotaha means then which is the Vachaka of the Sakhanda. Sakhanda is which is separated. That Varna is taken out, that is called the Sakhanda Varna Spotaha. And so on and so forth for all the 8 types of Spota. What is of more interest to us is the difference between Spota and Varnavada. As we said, meaning is revealed by Spota, which is different from Varnas. In Spotavada, it is held that meaning is actually revealed by Spota and not by Varnas. And all that each Varna does is it reveals Spota more and more clearly. Okay? Spota revealed by the first Varna of the Vaikhari would be indistinct, and the proper form of Spota can be established only after the last Varna is pronounced. But as we go through some part of it, we start understanding what is happening. Now, Mimamsaka says, okay, look, I don't dispute that Artha gets revealed more and more. But you know what? This concept of Spota is not necessary. Right? Meaning is revealed by Varnas, and the Anupurvi, the order of Varnas, is sufficient to reveal Artha or meaning here. And they say that Spota is an unnecessary Kalpana Gauravam. Gauravaya means Occam's razor is applied in Shastra. Whenever we can have a simplified explanation of something, that is always likely to be the more correct approach. This is famously seen in the case of heliocentrism and geocentrism. Earlier, many people used to believe that Earth is the center of the universe. When Earth is the center of the universe, you find some problems in these divine celestial objects. There is regression of these objects while their rotation around Earth is seen. So different planets, it is seen that instead of going anti-clockwise, there will be a period when they go clockwise. So in Jyotisha, that period is also given a certain name, and there are some doshas or whatever. But when you try to map the orbits of planets around the Earth, your theory becomes more and more complicated, right? That, okay, there is one force doing it, making them go anti-clockwise, but there is some other force. Sometimes it becomes stronger. It makes it go clockwise. Again, it starts going anti-clockwise. And remember, I'm talking about 1500s, 1400s or earlier. There was no way of really observing everything and establishing clearly. You only see from the skies from Earth and you have to make up your theory. Then Galileo came and said, look, I have a much simpler theory. If everything was going anti-clockwise around the sun, then if Earth is also one of them, then whatever we observe, it can be very easily explained. Now, this is a much simpler theory, right? Therefore, Occam's razor says that a simpler theory should be accepted compared to a more complicated theory. Now, in Sanskrit, we don't use those terms Occam and all. Occam also was actually a very ancient person, almost contemporary of Sabaraswamy, etc. We simply say Laghavam and Gauravam. Wherever there is Laghavam that is preferred in an argument, Wherever there is gauravam, that is gauravam means heaviness. That is dropped. So in the argument of the Mimamsaka, who follows Varnavada, Spota is an unnecessary gauravam. Whatever you say, I'm agreeing. But you know what? I can just say that the Varnas are revealing the Artha directly. Okay. So let me give a demonstration of this. We see that initially when somebody is uttering a sentence, only the letter Ya is heard. Then Yat Cha is heard. Yat Shabdaha. Yat Shabdaha. You can see slowly each one of the other Varnas gets revealed, so to speak. And as we start going down the sentence, we'll start understanding it. Okay, we hear no Yat Shabdaha, Yat Shabdaha, Aha. Whatever is said by Shabda, okay, okay, that, like you can say Asma, we can maybe imagine it's Asmakam. Oh, for us, whatever Shabda says, for us, that is, the moment you see Pra, most people will make up the letter, two letters of Ma and Nam easily enough. Oh, okay. What Bhartrahari is saying is that Shabdaha Asmakam Pramanam. Actually, Patanjali says this. What it says is, whatever is conveyed by Shabda, that alone is the standard for us. It is the position of grammar. I've just taken the sentence. Now, this is the method which is agreed by both Mimamsakas and Vyakaranas. The only difference is that for the Mimamsaka, whatever letter is becoming darker, it is the part of Spota, which is the entire sentence, which is not visible because it's not yet illuminated, but it is there, and that alone carries meaning. Whereas for the Mimamsaka, it doesn't matter if one of them keeps coming. This Anupurvi, this order of Ya, Cha, Da, Ha, that is sufficient to convey the meaning. Now we'll see more detailed arguments going forward between these two, but the direct opposition to Sphotavada is not Nyaya, is not Buddhism or something else, but it is Varnavada. Varnavada is what is propagated by the Mimamsakas and accepted by Vedantins. As I said earlier, Vyasa made a sutra where it talks about Shabda Nityatva. Then the commentators have to explain how is Shabda Nitya, and they resort to Varnavada. So up to here, we can still accommodate both the Mimamsakas in the sense that, okay, you don't want to call it Spota, you want to call it Shabda. Okay, sir, fine, we have no problem. To that extent, if we are saying that, Shabda is Nitya, Shabda is a conceptual entity, you don't want to call it Spota, we are okay with that. We are just giving one more name Spota because we want to convey that whatever is revealed as one and in a flash and not in a gradual manner. You don't want to do all that, it's okay. You don't want an extra technical jargon word, it's okay. But where Vyakaranas and Mimamsakas cannot agree is that Varnas are the one which will reveal meaning. Varnas cannot reveal meaning. Varnas can only reveal Spota, and Spota reveals meaning for Vyakaranas. Why it is so, we'll go forward and see. The entire theory is constructed around that. And this theory of Mimamsakas makes them go into knots of explaining each and everything there. In fact, they themselves now cannot agree after some time how is meaning determined. All of this we will see going forward. But in Spota, this is what is important. So we've seen about two kinds of Shabdas are discussed mainly. Neither Pashyanti nor Para is normally discussed because Pashyanti is only for yogis. And who amongst us is a yogi that we can really discuss it? And Para is for Brahmajnanis. So it's completely out of syllabus, so to speak, for us. So between Madhyama and Vaikhari, I'm really trying to summarize what Bhartrahari said in Brahmakanda. There are two kinds of Shabdas. One Vaikhari, which illuminates the other. That is the Madhyama, and which is used to convey the meaning. Some ancients hold these to be different, others hold them to be one, which are perceived as different. Now, even here we have different schools, and Vyakaranas are very good. Or they can accommodate both. Sir, you believe both of them are safe? No problem. You believe they are different? No problem. Both we can live with, we can agree with. And we'll explain whatever is required with both methods. It's okay. So similarly, when it comes to whether Shabda denotes Dravya or Jati, similar kind of differences are there and they're accommodated. In the same way that the intrinsic fire in Arani ignites another fire, Shabda which resides in one's mind is the cause of speech sounds. So here a question comes up, how is this encoding, and decoding happening, right? So the example of fire is there. Arani is that wooden bowl in which some dry grass is kept, and another stick is rapidly, I should say, rubbed, and the friction generates heat. That heat kind of heats up the air around it, and fire is born, and the whatever grass you keep there catches fire. So earlier we used to have people called Nityagnihotris. Even today we have few families, about 50 families in AP Telangana, I believe, in whose home the fire never is doused. Fire is always there. But for somebody who is an Ahitagni and is no longer has the fire has to be generated using this method of igniting it in Arani. Igniting fire in Arani was therefore very common in the time of Bhadrarish times. Sometimes it could rain, sometimes the roof could give through. It would be possible for the fire not to be maintained, then it has to be started again. It used to be started with this Arani. Now the question was, where is the fire before it got generated? The answer was it was in the Arani. And that simile is being used here, that the Shabda which resides in the Vakta's mind is the cause of speech sound, which is the Vaikari, but that is there innately without being manifest. But when somebody speaks, it gets manifest. Similarly, after enough friction, the fire which is there in the Arani, which is coming out into the grass, and therefore your Agnihotra and all. Similar stimuli is being used here. So what is important is that the Spota Shabda is without order, right? It is still seen as possessing order of Aksharas when it comes to Vaikari, and as if it is born in a certain sequence. Just like a reflection in a water seems to move when the water moves. The whole point is we will see sun and moon waving in the water, and they are not really waving or whatever. It is the medium which is fluctuating. Similarly, this order belongs to Vaikari because it's just reflecting or illuminating Spota. Spota itself is devoid of order of Shabdas. In knowledge, both the form of object and the form of knowledge is seen. Similarly, in Shabda, both the form of meaning and that of Shabda are seen. This requires some explanation. In Advaita, we call this vritti. The question is, when you see a pot, how do you know it is a pot? The answer is that Chitta in one's mind takes the shape of the pot. That is called the Ghata Buddhi, Ghata Dihi, right? That is called the vritti, right? Therefore, it said, in knowledge, both the form of object and the form of knowledge is seen. Now, this gets even more complicated. This is called Anuvyavasaya and Nyaya. Okay, there is an object and you have a cognition of the object. And how do you know you got the cognition or knowledge of the object, right? That's what he's saying. In knowledge, both are there. It's not merely Artha, but also Shabda. Similarly, in Shabda, a form of meaning Artha and Shabda both are there. Just like the yolk of an egg develops into a bird with many parts, similarly, this Madhyama Shabda evolves into the Vaikari Shabda with the order of Varnas, etc. But I mean, a bird has a certain structure to it, that it has two wings, that it has two legs, those legs have tendons, it has a beak, it has eyes, it has ears, and all these feathers. Do we see all of this in the yolk of a egg? No, we don't. But then if they were not in the egg, how did this come? It's just that it is innately present. Similarly, all the order we see in Ghata, Pata, etc. in the Vaikari Shabdas, it exists innately within Shabda. Both the Artha and the Shabda exist. More examples are being given. When a painter draws a form, first he observes the various parts of the form, then forms a unified view in which the parts cannot be differentiated, and then while drawing the form, draws each part separately. Just imagine a painter has to draw the portrait of some person, right? Say Narendra Modi. He will observe the person very closely, right? But finally, when his observation is over, in his mind, there is only one image, one unified image. Yet, when it translates this unified image, we'll see that first maybe the outline is drawn, then maybe the eyes are drawn or the placeholders are drawn, then they are developed. But the parts come one by one. Just like in painting, even in communication and thought, the idea exists as a whole but gets expressed part by part. Similarly, Shabda exists in 3 states, that is having many parts, order, etc. when it is first heard by a person, without any parts or order when it is in the mind of the hearer, and with parts and order when it is spoken again by the same person. Same analogy is being repeated here. I mean, a similar thing is again expressed. The last one is important here, which is that once Shabda expresses the meaning, once Shabdas express the meaning, they exhaust their potential and are not perceived because they have become secondary to the expressed sense. The question is, you said Shabda is Nitya. Yes, sir. So the word Ghata always is there. Yes, sir. Somebody said Ghata. Yes. Then I understood Ghata. Yes. Now, where has Ghata gone? Right? So this is the explanation for that. Once they express their meaning, they exhaust their potential. That Shakti is over. And further, they are not perceived because their main job is done, right? They were supposed to give a meaning. You wanted to know whether it was a ghata or a pata, pot or a cloth. You understood what it is. Then you are no longer conscious of that Shabda. But if you ask a Vyakarana, the Shabda is still there. But it does not have the Vaikhari which is going to illuminate it. Therefore, you are not able to perceive it. If you are a yogi, you would have perceived it. That's why in Yoga Shastra it is said that if you do all the abhyas of Yama, Niyama, etc., you can understand the language of birds, you can count the sand grains in the universe and so on and so forth, because you have now developed extra sensitive perception where you can perceive these, right? That's the reason why we say that the Vedic rishis are not, they did not write the mantras, but they are mantra drashtas. They saw the mantras, they perceived the mantras because they have that extra ability. Normal people, we can perceive anything only when Vaikhari illuminates it. So this is an important concept where it ties up with what we see and what our position is about Shabda Nityatva. We have kind of gone a bit faster here because one problem is that when you are live, you see the faces, you know somebody understood something or not, you kind of slow down. But in a webinar, it is very difficult. Still, in terms of Upasamhara, what we can say is that Spota is a conceptual sound, Madhyama, the one without temporal divisions. So, a subject of our series of lectures itself is Sphotavada. Then understanding what is Spota is important. And the simplest understanding is that it is Madhyama. It is that conceptual entity and Arthasya Vachakaha. It is the one which conveys meaning. It is not Varnas, it is not Vaikhari which conveys meaning, but Madhyama which conveys meaning. And the second important part is that it is without temporal divisions. It does not have divisions of time, etc. This needs to be understood very clearly by us. Then in Vaikhari or Dhvani, this Madhyama is transformed into having many parts. When we have the questions of how is Madhyama getting, exploded or developed into the Vaikhari with so many parts, we have seen examples how the yolk of an egg develops into a full-fledged bird, or in terms of communication model we've seen how the painter example. In all these cases, something is there innately and then it gets expressed or developed when moving from one form to the other. And finally, communication happens according to the Vyakaranas only when Madhyama is deduced by the listener. That is the reason why I gave the example of Tundra. If I say that I was in a Tundra and there is a person who's listening who doesn't understand what Tundra means, whatever I said is meaningless. Varna is there, right? The Vaikhari is there, but Madhyama is not there. And decoding ability to convert this Varna into that concept is missing. Therefore, communication has not occurred. Right? That's the reason why it is said Madhyama is the one which is the Arthasya Vachakaha. Right? And that's what really Spota is. And why Spota? Because another thing I've not mentioned here is that it occurs in a flash. Without temporal divisions means that it is not so many varnas, it is not so many padas, it is not so many vakyas. For that, the best example is Siddhanta Kaumudi itself, which is a bulky book of 8 volumes or 4 volumes, but in the mind of Bhattoji Dikshita, it is one concept. That's all. That's the reason why he could say, Iyam Siddhanta Kaumudi, right? Virachyate. Use present tense and Iyam there. So the important part is that Spota is like a flash and it is one without divisions. Within that, we can further divide Spota into what we call Vyakti Spota and Jati Spota. We know what Vyakti and Jati are. That means there is somebody who says that there is akara vyakti and akara jati, right? Now you will say, what is this akara vyakti, akara jati? The akara jati can be said to have 18 types of akara vyakti. What are those? First you have rasva a, then you have dirgha a, then you have pluta a. It is done 3 times, right? Then these 3 can be anunasika or ananunasika, right? That is nasal or without being nasal. Okay. Then they can mean 3 swaras, right? Anudatta, udatta, swarita. So in different pitches. So they keep on multiplying like that. All of that will be called akara jati. And one spota can be only for the jati, or we can give for the vyakti varna also. That's the kind of thing. Of course, this is not the only differentiation of jati and vyakti. Vyakti is any particular instance or realization of that particular class, right? So it can be other ways also. But all of these 8, if we go like that, the only guide for us is that arthasya vachakaha spotaha. That means in all these senses, the vachaka of these things has to be called as that particular spota. So this is really an overview of spota and its divisions. I'll open questions and see what was written here. Lakshma Reddy Garu is asking, can spota be called abstract and varna as absolute? Sir, spota is indeed abstract. That's perfectly right. Is varna absolute? Now, I don't know, because absolute typically is a word we reserve for Brahman, right? But if you mean finite, yes. If you mean tangible, yes. If you mean perceptible, yes. But is it absolute? I don't know. That's not something that we would use, or at least that is not the traditional usage of that particular word. But abstract is perfectly all right. Yes, spota is abstract. For Shrota, only Varna matters. See, this is complicated, right? Ultimately, only Madhyama, only Spota is the one which will give the meaning. But you cannot transmit Spota directly. Spota has to be transmitted through Varna only. In that sense, Varna only matters. But in the sense that Varna will not be doing its job if the decoder is not there. Like the example of Tundra. If that understanding is not there, then Varna doesn't matter. Therefore, only Varna matters would be wrong in that particular sentence. Right? That's the reason why we cannot say for Shrota only Varna matters. It is like to do any exchange, some medium is required. That medium is Varna. It is essential. But is it sufficient? No. Necessary? Yes. I hope that answers. Then we have Sri Bhaskar Autapalligar asking, is Spota concept related to Nada Brahma? Very much, sir. Very closely related, actually. In fact, Nagesh Bhatta, who is an Advaitin and a Vyakarana, finally says Bindu is the ultimate. And you'll see that many Nadopasakas also kind of converge towards this Bindu, right? It can be said that the foundations are given in Sphotavada, and these are further taken up there. I don't have too much of knowledge of Sangita. Even for learning Veda, it is a big thing because I seem to be tone deaf. So I cannot further elaborate on what this Nada Brahman is. But there is a pointer called Pratikopasana in Vedanta. Right? That means since we cannot pursue Brahman directly, we can take a Pratika for Brahman and do the Upasana. So when we talk about Nada Brahma, especially let's say Tyagaraja Swami, what is really happening is that Tyagaraja has taken Nada to be the representative of Brahma and started Upasana of that. To that extent, it is perfectly allowed. And in fact, when we do Samanvaya of Advaita and Sphotavada, this kind of place that this is a lower Brahman is completely acceptable to Advaitas. So that might give a pointer to about Nada Brahma. Meenakshi Garu is asking, where can we place intuition in the stages of Sabda? intuition is really Madhyama, madam, where you get an idea, but the only thing with intuition, what happens is we call it intuition with certain negative characteristics. The two negative characteristics of intuition are there is no reasoned what you call thesis. We simply feel this is better. We call it gut feeling or intuition. And second, there usually some lack of clarity. But both these negatives cannot be associated with Madhyama. In fact, these negatives are what is called Brahma. Brahma is the opposite of Brahma. Brahma is proper knowledge, Brahma is improper knowledge. And in that sense, intuition, when it is not clear, will not come under Brahma, but will come under Brahma. But if you talk about intuition as something where the reasoning is not fully developed, but you kind of get what the final position ought to be, Madhyama is a bit more than that. Even the reasoning is implicitly present in that. Now you can come back and say, yeah, even my intuition is usually right, and I can develop the reasoning later. If that is the case, fine, we can use. And grammarians are historically famous to be very pragmatic. But there are subtle differences in what I would say. But the closest stage for intuition would be Madhyama. Okay, again, Bhaskarji is saying, it is said that all sounds are contained in Om. Could you please throw light on this? Bhartrihari himself says Pranava is the Pratika of Brahman. Some people give actual examples that Om is Om, and all that. Therefore, will get translated into that, O into that, and all that. But I don't think that is what Bhartrihari had in mind when he says Omkara is Brahman, or any of our elders when they say Om iti ekaksharam Brahma. What it really means is, as we saw, Shabda has 4 levels or 4 stages: Para, Paschanti, Madhyama, Vaikhari. And it is only in Vaikhari that we have all these differentiations that A is different, Ka is different, Ga is different, Cha is different, Ta is different. Now, what is the status of Shabda in the other 3 stages? There are no differences, right? At the Para level, we have our elders telling us, look, if you, or maybe it's the Paschanti level, we can take Om as one Shabda, which is a Pratika of Brahman. Now, there are a few auspicious words like Om, Atha, etc. Why are these auspicious? Because Prajapati at the beginning of creation uttered those. And it is said that they are auspicious. Beyond that, there is nothing intrinsic that Shastra talks about. Because it is auspicious, it is only a pratika, it is only a symbol. So when we say Om contains all Shabdas, to the extent that Om represents Madhyama and Paschanti stages, or even sometimes Para stages of Shabda, all of them will contain definitely all sounds, because we just saw. But we must remember something, it is not Om which contains it. Om is a signifier, right? It is what is signified by Om that contains. Of course, in the ultimate analysis, that the signifier and the signified are the same. That's all right. But this is how we are able to say that Om contains all sounds through its Dyotakatva of Brahman, right? And Sarvam Khalidam Brahma, all sounds are indeed Brahman. If Om is Brahman, then Om contains all sounds. At least this is how I understand, sir.
Sivasenani, I think you could take other questions towards the end, so that whatever questions is, it will be better to take at the end after you finish the presentation.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah.
Because it's now 5:50. We'll come back at 6 p.m. and then continue. In Shreyaji, I'll take your question after the second part, part number 4, or second part of this session is over. It is 6 p.m. Should we start?
Yes, just waiting for you. You can start anytime.
Okay, sure. I'll do that. So before starting with the next topic, there are a couple of questions which are better resolved now because they kind of refer to Spota, and we just discussed Spota in some detail. First, I'll take Meenakshi Gari's question. Om is Ekaksharam versus taking Om as a Shabda. A little confused here. Akshara versus Shabda. Madam, there is no need for confusion because Shabda can mean an Akshara, a Pratyaya, a Pada, a Vakya, a Mahavakya. Mahavakya is what we call a discourse in English, or a Kavya, entire Vangmayam, entire world, Brahman, Atman, all of that is Shabda only. Right? As I said, my Guruji Mahamahopadhyaya Brahmasri Koradu Subramanian Garu gave 16 definitions, 16 meanings of Shabda. So Shabda means both word and Varna and 14 other things. Now the question is, if that is the case, hey, why can't you use words more precisely? Normally we try to use, but in some cases like Shabda, it happens that they have a lot of meaning and we have to pick up whatever is appropriate in that particular context. Therefore, when we talk about Om with Ekaksharam, that's just a way of saying that such a small Shabda with a single Akshara can mean this infinite Brahman. Brahman, in fact, means that something which is very big. That is what is Brahman actually, etymologically speaking. But one Akshara in Om, that means Brahman, that is the wonder. That is Ashcharya in saying Om with Ekaksharam Brahma. To bring out that, we are saying Ekaksharam. But otherwise, that Akshara itself is a Shabda. Om is a Shabda. Therefore, we have no confusion. Now, this explanation kind of plugs into what Shreya Mudgilji is asking. There are multiple questions there. First question is, what about the difference in meaning by speaker and receiver? And also, more on Siddha, relation between Shabda and Artha. You are saying that the relation between Shabda and Artha is fixed. Then how can words have infinite meanings if this is true? And Shabda itself is one example of that. So that's how it plugs into this question. So let me try to clarify these issues. It is true that the world is full of miscommunication. The speaker says something, the listener listens something else totally. Right? This happens all the time. If only we had perfect communication, we would have 90% less quarrels. We would be 90% more happy. This is very well known. So why is this happening? Is it the problem of Shastra, or is it the problem of our knowledge, or is it the problem of our manas and its gunas? We need to really understand this in some depth, right? People do not make an effort to understand what the speaker is trying to say. They see gaps, or they don't see gaps, they assume. Oftentimes, they assume certain thoughts behind certain expressions. If somebody says something, they say, okay, he or she is speaking like this because they think like this, right? They make those connections, and these connections are the reason for misunderstanding. It is not that Shabda is at fault or that whatever is happening in communication is the issue, right? Whatever the problem is there is because of these extra communicatory assumptions, right? That's the reason why there is a difference in what the intent of the speaker and what is understood by the listener happen. People are not slowing down, and there is a big essay by about not very big, a very interesting essay by George Orwell on the fatigue of metaphors. So we use metaphors all the time, but don't ever pause to understand whether how the metaphors are working. Because of this speed reading, speed listening, people are not letting this process of encoding, decoding happen correctly. I'm not just saying listener, even the speakers are not being careful enough. Their vakyas have doshas of ativyapti and avyapti, right? So if people learn Shastra better, be more precise in communicating and more mindful in listening, yes, communication will improve. But these are all not really the problems at the level of the model of communication. In the context of Spota, by Spota we really mean the model of communication that we built it here. In many Shastric discussions, there is a differentiation between Shastra-nishtha dosha and Vyakti-nishtha dosha, right? So if there is a Vyakti-nishtha dosha, that cannot be ascribed to the Shastra. So what I'm trying to say is that these are Vyakti-nishtha doshas because of lack of education, lack of care and mindfulness in encoding the message, lack of care and mindfulness in listening and decoding the message. But the process itself works fine if we take care of these issues. So that should be in the context of Spota. The relation between Shabda and Artha, and if it is Nitya, why is this infinite meaning? This is very interesting. So for those who might be wondering about this infinite meanings, hey, how can a word have infinite meanings? Let me take you to Alankara Shastra or Mimamsa and explain that part a bit. I hope I'm getting that intent of Shreya ji correctly. The process of denoting meaning, or Artha Vyapara as it is called, is threefold in Alankara Shastra. One is called Abhida, one is Lakshana, and one is Vyangya. Abhida is what we call dictionary meaning. And usually we only refer to Abhida normally. In Abhida, what happens is that a given word has a given meaning. That's it. For example, Kal means tomorrow. Right? I'm using the word Kal purposefully. Now, there is Lakshana. Right? In Lakshana, what happens is the word gets a secondary meaning. In getting a secondary meaning, there has to be a Mukhyartha Badha. For the Mukhyartha, there must be some hindrance. Only then the secondary meaning should kick in. The famous example given is Gangayam Ghoshaha. Ghosha is a village of cowherds and it is there in Ganga. Now, Mukhyartha is that village in Ganga. Village in Ganga doesn't make sense. Therefore, we have to take it as on the banks of Ganga. Right? Ganga Tire, Ganga Kule, Ghoshaha. So, we take a secondary sense of Gangayam as Ganga Tire. Right? Why? For the Mukhyartha of Gangayam, there is a Badha, therefore we do this. So sometimes words have slightly different meanings. Gangayam being in Saptami Bhakti Ekavachana must have been on Ganga, in Ganga. Right? There is no question of bank here, Tira or Pula. But still, we have to take it because the main meaning is not tenable. Right? This is what is called Lakshana or Gauna or Bhaktam in Mimamsa. There is a third process of denotation of meaning, which is called Vyanjana. Vyanjana means, you remember those old fans, right? We used to take a fan and do this. What we are doing by that is we are spreading the air. A Vyanjaka is a spreader. A fan is a Vyanjaka, right? It spreads the meaning far away. Now we'll come back to the Kal we used in Abhida to mean tomorrow. If you're talking to a Hyderabadi and say Kab milenge and he says Kal milenge, that Kal is not tomorrow. That Kal is some indefinite point of time in the future and it is not even near future, right? So Hyderabadis have repurposed Kal to mean whatever they want, right? Similarly, you will find that wherever Vyang is very popular, suddenly there is poetry there, right? For example, it is said that, when people from Bundelkhand speak, it is full of Vyang, right? They cannot speak in a straight manner, right? It is supposed to be very witty, satiric and all that. So, this Vyanjana, the Vyapara of Vyanjana, it extends the meaning of word way beyond what a dictionary can do, and it is limited only by the pratibha of Kavi. In that sense, every word has an infinite meaning in the hands of a talented Kavi. Okay. See, for example, Kalidasa has to bring out the lajja, the abashedness of Parvati when the Saptarishis come on behalf of Parameshwara to ask for her hand. She is very interested as to why these people came. Okay, she has been doing penance and she was assured by Shiva that he will marry her. And obviously these were sent by Shiva, therefore she wants to listen. At the same time, being a girl, unmarried girl, she should not participate in these discussions. So when the Saptarishis come to ask Himavat in Kumara Sambhavam, Parvati is there, she is not going away. At the same time, she cannot express interest directly, therefore she is doing Leela Kamala Patrani Ganayamasa Parvati. Right? She had an imaginary lotus in her hand, and it was counting the petals of this. She was counting the petals of this imaginary lotus with her head down. So, with these simple words, with Kalidasa paints a picture of a girl who is very interested but at the same time she has lajja, that she's slightly embarrassed also. So she's putting her head down and doing this. Nowhere has he used the word lajja, but it comes out very clearly here. What is she actually doing? Ganaya masa, she's counting. But the sense we get is of being slightly embarrassed, being slightly curious. That's the reason why we say that these shabdas have infinite meanings. Having established the question, now Shreya's question is, look, you said Shabda and Artha have a what do you call fixed relationship. Now we are talking about Vyanjana Vyapara, and in Vyangya you are saying that any Shabda can mean anything. So my answer, ma'am, is every Shabda means every Artha. Right? Please don't take me as some Nityananda Swami who talks nonsense. This is the position of grammarians, wherein every dhatu can mean everything else. Somebody as learned as Nagesha has said that. Why do we say that? Because ultimately each Shabda has a Shabdatva Jati benefit, and benefit we have Brahman, and Brahman is everything. Therefore, when in the hands of a Rasika, in the hands of a Sahridaya, in the hands of a Kavi, they are able to tap into this Brahman directly. The more you do that, the more you see that you can expand the influence of Shabda. In other words, when we say that a Shabda can have infinite meaning depending on the pratibha of the Kavi or the Sahridaya. Sahridaya is the listener, who also needs to be equally talented to be able to grasp that. We are saying that, look, we have a tool with infinite potential, and it is your talent which is limiting this tool. So the more talented you are, the more powerful this tool becomes. Therefore, in the hands of a Pamara, Shabda will have only Abhida. Even in Abhida, he'll only one thing. For example, the word Hari has 16 meanings or 14 meanings. 16, 14, I don't remember now. But for him, Hari means only Vishnu, because he's only a Vishnu Bhakta. He doesn't know any meaning of Hari. Sorry, he's not talented enough for that. But in the hands of a Kavi, Hari can mean anything. Then that is the talent of that. But Hari's potential itself is infinite. Right? It is our ability to tap into what part of potential. So that's the reason why we say Shabda and Artha have a fixed sambandha. It doesn't vary. It is eternal. Yet, many Shabdas have limited meanings. Some Shabdas have infinite meanings, and in different times in the hands of different people. I hope that resolves the question. Having done that, let us go to the later part of the talk. I need to share my video, right? Okay, share my screen. Okay. In the earlier part of this session, we covered about Spota, and we are discussing it for some length now, almost 10 minutes. Please excuse this, but I thought Shreya's question was very interesting because it touched on other topics as well. And the more we are sure-footed about all this, we see that all the seemingly apparently opposition positions can come together. That's the reason why I spent some time in elaborating that. Now we'll get into Varna, Pada, and Vakya. In fact, this also touches upon Meenakshi Garu's question as to what this Shabda is. Is there a difference between Pada and Varna? Right. In this, we'll cover Pada Shastra versus Vakya Shastra. We'll examine the reality of Varna, Pada, and Vakya. And we'll also examine the pedagogy, which is called Balanam Apalalanam. And as usual, we'll have Upasamhara summarizing everything. So, it's interesting that we come upon the word Padavakya Pramana Shastrani after discussing Alankara Shastra. In Sahitya, it is said both a Kavi and a Vimarsaka or a Sahridaya should be Padavakya Pramanavit to really understand Alankara Shastra. Alankara Shastra is nothing but combination of these three. So what are these three Shastras of Pada Shastra, Vakya Shastra, and Pramana Shastra? Pada Shastram Nama Vyakaranam. Vyakaranam is what is called as Pada Shastram because its primary purpose is to differentiate Sadhu Shabda from Asadhu Shabda, proper words from improper words. And Purva Mimamsa is Vakya Shastram because it helps establish the meaning of a sentence. So Veda Vakyas are what are interpreted by Purva Mimamsa. Mimamsa is actually discussion, but in Shastric terms, any discussion cannot be Mimamsa. Mimamsa is Pujita Vicharaha. That means Vichara of something which is respected. Right? This is the definition given by Vachaspati Mishra in his Bhamati. And Nyayaha is Pramana Shastra, because it is useful in correct application of standards of proof. Standards of proof are Pramana. Mainly we know about Anumana, but there are other standards of proof as well. Within this, we need to give what we call note certain things, that what we call Nyaya now, it's not what it is, right? It used to be called Anvikshaki at some time, but what Nyaya, the word meant Nyaya was Mimamsa. Mimamsa was routinely called Nyaya. In fact, there's a book in the 15th century which has the title called Nyaya, but it's a Mimamsa book. So most librarians, they get confused and they put it in the section on Nyaya, right? Apadeva's book. But it's actually a book on Mimamsa, because Nyaya meant Mimamsa for a long, long time, as late as 15th century. And what we mean by Nyaya now is not the old Nyaya, as it were, because Nyaya and Vaiseshika got clubbed, and the strong influence is of Vaiseshika rather than Nyaya. So what we talk about Navya Nyaya is again combination of Nyaya and Vaiseshika. So be it. This being the case, the main discussions in the olden days were between Mimamsa and Vyakarana, right? Though we have all the three Shastras required in Alankara Shastra, incidentally, Alankara Shastra started in about 7th century AD or whatever, and after Anandavardhana, it came on a firm footing, and there has been an explosion of Alankara Shastra works in Kashmir and other parts of the country. It went on till about 1600 AD. After that, it kind of slowed down, where the focus shifted again. But it started around 7th century or so, Alankara Shastra, right? But earlier than that, the two key Shastras or the two key discussions we see is mainly between Mimamsa and Vyakarana. So we really have something called Padashastra versus Vakya Shastra. To repeat, Padashastra is Vyakarana, Vakya Shastra is Mimamsa. Now, both schools had interpretation of Veda and language in general as a central object. Right? We already saw that Vyakarana was a Vedanga. Right? Vedanga, you had to learn Vyakarana first, and then you had to learn Veda. Even today, if you go to Arya Samaj Gurukuls, they teach all the Vedangas. The students learn them by heart till whatever time it takes. Usually they become 13, 14, 15, 16 by the time they learn all the 6 Vedangas, and then they start Vedadhyayana. But by that time, there is pressure on them to earn. They start coming out. They are all very good scholars of Vyakarana because they know all the 4,000 sutras by heart. Usually they end up as teachers or Vyakarana Panditas and get side income in, by the way, teaching yoga. And that's a very common profile. But what I'm trying to say is that these people, following the old method, learn Vedangas first and then learn Veda later. Many are not finishing it. That apart, Vyakarana was learned as a prerequisite to learn Veda. Right? Why? It was useful in interpreting Veda. Therefore, interpretation of Veda being its job, it took it its central role. And one more thing was, Vyakarana always was applicable equally to Veda and secular language. It is not like we have a Vedanga Vyakarana which is different and a Laukika Vyakarana which is different. No, the same rules apply equally both ways. So one corollary of that is, many people think that swaras are required only in Veda and in normal language swaras are not required. No, that is not the case. Even in our spoken language, there is supposed to be swara. Many times there is swara, right? Especially when you make a statement and you want to make it like a question, right? Something like, no dinner at home tonight, and you want to make it a question, is there no dinner at home tonight? Your swara on tonight will change. It's like, no dinner at home tonight. That's a questioning. There you are ending in a swarita, right? If you really observe. So these are already stated clearly in Vyakarana, right? What happens to a samasa when you have udatta at what place? Ajidata and Antyodatta, right? It becomes a Bahuvrihi and a Tatpurusha. And we have plays on Bahuvrihi and Tatpurusha also. For example, somebody has a play on Lokanatha. Somebody says, Rajan, you and I both are Lokanathas, but you are the Lokasya Natha, and Lokaha Natha Yasya Saha, that is it. I am Bahuvrihi and you are Tatpurusha. Right? So the difference in these two has to be in the swara. And another part which again people are not usually aware is that it is not necessary to always recite Veda with swara. Okay. In fact, there is something called Ekashruti, and in many cases Veda needs to be recited in Ekashruti only, including in yajnas. right? So the more we get into Shastra, the more we learn such things. But the whole point is Vyakarana applies equally to Veda and secular language. It does not differentiate. So if it was interpreting Veda, it is also interpreting language. And then Mimamsa is a Shastra of fixing the meaning of Veda, right? Its whole purpose, its definition is Pujita Vicharaha. It does the Vichara of what is Pujita. Pujita here is Veda, right? And in fact, Mimamsa uses Vyakarana extensively in this analysis, in fixing the meaning. So we had these two Shastras doing pretty much the same job, but slightly coming from slightly different things. And very paradoxically, the names are actually reversed. Though we call Mimamsa as the Vakya Shastra and Vyakarana as the Pada Shastra, we'll see that going forward, their emphasis is reversed. Mimamsa's emphasis is on Pada and Vyakarana's emphasis is on the Vakya. And one more example, if you need, of how Mimamsa and Vyakarana are totally interlaced, right, is if you look at Sayana's commentary on Veda, almost every passage, it includes grammatical rules and the discussions. And often, whenever discussion is needed, there will be an extract from Mimamsa as it is, right? And Sayana simply says, Atra asti Mimamsa, and he starts off. Afterwards, till Iti comes, all that is an extract from the Purva Mimamsa. Like that, even when today also, when we want to fix the meaning of Veda, we use both Vyakarana and Mimamsa. In the earlier days, it was much, much more so. So we had two ways of interpreting these two. That's the reason why we need to kind of take their roles in a comparative manner. Vyakarana is an idealistic school and Mimamsa is a realistic school. I'll spend some time on what is an idealistic school and what is a realistic school. Earlier, we saw that Artha can be Bauddha or Bahya, right? Bauddha Artha is called conceptual or idealistic by English-speaking people. That means their meaning or entities are primarily conceptual, primarily in Buddhi. Okay, we call them Bauddhartha. Vyakarana treats entities or artha to be mainly in Buddhi. Mimamsa is a realistic school in the sense that there has to be a existence in the real world as an entity for them, for that to be called an artha, to be denoted by a Shabda. So it's a realistic school. This is the key difference. Now, Vyakarana believes in Srishti and Pralaya. Mimamsa does not believe in Srishti and Pralaya, right? They say that we don't know if there was a Srishti, we don't know if there's going to be a Pralaya, and therefore we hold that this world always was like this, right? If we believe this, there are some problems there. We'll come to that later. For Mimamsa, attainment of Swarga is the major motivation, whereas Vyakarana has attainment of Swarga and liberation as motivation. There is also moksha here. In Mimamsa, there is no moksha. You always have the samsara. You do punya, you go to Swarga. You spend your punya there, come back, and again you start with the balance, and you do papa, you go to hell and come back. That keeps on happening. The same happens in Vyakarana's view also, but you also have an escape from this cycle, right? Mimamsa is hyper-rational. It's so hyper-rational that people openly say that it is an atheistic school. I should not say Nastika because Nastika is about belief in Veda. Mimamsa totally believes in Veda, but their belief in God, or I could not say that they don't believe in God. Obviously, they believe in God because in every yajna there are two things which are important, which is the Devata and the Dravya or Havis, right? So God is important. They believe in God, but if you look at what that godness of that God is, it is very disappointing. It's almost Ishvara has no place. Why Ishvara has no place? Because the belief in Karma Siddhanta is so strong in Mimamsa that whatever your karma, your phala must be as per that. Then what is this Mr. Ishvara doing? He has no job. And where is he? Oh, he exists only in the Shabda, right? Everything is Shabda. So when we say Indra exists when we are doing the Uchcharan of Indra Shabda. Therefore, if 10 people are saying Indraya Swaha, Indra is there in all the 10 homes when everybody is offering Havis to Indra, right? And this Indra is completely, impotent. He can do nothing because if only we do good, we get good. If we don't do good karma, we don't get good karma. Practically useless Indra we have, but we have to give offering to him. Otherwise, we will not get rain or water. So it is almost called an atheistic school, right? Whereas, and it's very dogmatic. It's very clear. No, it is like this one. You don't get any. They hate Vikalpa. Mimamsakas They don't want multiple positions on anything. In very rare cases, they accept Vikalpa, but even there, it is with a great resistance. Vyakarana is the complete opposite, right? They don't argue certain things to great depths. They just tell you it is how this is and leave it at that for you to work it out. They don't give full-fledged explanations. Very pragmatic. They accommodate multiple positions. You want to say that, one Shabda should have one Artha, okay. One Shabda should have multiple Arthas, okay. Should have infinite Arthas, okay. All of them are true, okay. But this cannot be true, okay. They can accommodate multiple positions and give you reasons for that. But when I wear a Mimamsaka hat, no. It's like, no, that's not correct. Only this is correct. That kind of thing you will see. They have a strong belief in Ishvara, yogis, etc. in Padashastra, in Vyakarana. Whereas in Mimamsa, Ishvara has a very relatively less place, right? Now, why am I highlighting these differences? Because now you see that though both of them are applying the same interpretation on the same corpus of Veda, and Mimamsa principles are also used in interpreting non-Vedic sentences because the principles are universal. In fact, they're so universal that in modern law, there is something called jurisprudence. Jurisprudence is how do you interpret law? And for somebody who studied Mimamsa, it seems very easy reading because it's essentially the same Sanskrit text or same principles of Sanskrit being put in English. See, for example, there is a general law and a specific law. In both jurisprudence and Mimamsa and in Vyakarana, by the way, the specific law has more power than the general law, right? The example we give here normally is that Brahmanebhyo Dadidiyatam Kaundinyaya Takram, right? There is some Samarohana going on. We are feeding many Brahmins. Then there is instruction by the Yajamana, give curd, Dadi Diyatam Brahmanebhya. For all the Brahmins, give Dadi. Amongst the Brahmins, there is one fellow called Kaundinya, right? This Kaundinya, he has maybe he has cold or whatever. Ayurveda says he should not eat curd. Therefore, give him takram, give him buttermilk or chach we call, right? Now, there are two laws here, right? One instruction, law means an instruction. One instruction is Brahmanebhya Dadidiyata. Give curd for Brahmins. Give buttermilk for Kaundinya. Kaundinya is also a Brahmin. But still, the specific rule of Kaundinya being given buttermilk has more power than the general rule. That is the example we give in traditional thing. But in the general thing, if we say that, income tax exemption, for example, is 2.5 lakhs for everybody. But if you are a senior citizen, it is 3 lakhs. So there are two laws now, right? On what is your standard exemption for income tax. Generally, it is 2.5 lakhs. But if you are a senior citizen, for you, both apply. Both general law and senior citizen law. But senior citizen law is more specific. Therefore, it prevails over the general law. This is how you can say that this is common sense. But I mean, I'm just giving an example where you can relate. There are also examples which are anti-common sense, but that is taken. Right? For example, Anavakasha is there. We'll not go into those details. All that I want to say is these principles are universal principles. These principles are not about one shastra, one corpus, or one situation, or even one domain. They apply across. And therefore, we see that there are different approaches of interpretation in our tradition. And the opponent of Vyakarana in this sense is mainly the Mimamsa. Okay, and therefore it behoves us to get into how Mimamsa looks at this Pada, Varna, and Sabda, and how Vyakarana looks at it. So, if we examine the theory of meaning, how is meaning understood? Within Mimamsa, there are two schools called Abhihitanvayavada and Anvitabhidhanavada. The first is by Kumarila Bhatta, where they say that Abhihita, right? Whatever is expressed, the first words and their meanings are understood. And then there is Anvaya of them. Okay? Anvaya is putting them together, mapping them into one another. And from that Anvaya, sentence meaning is derived. This looks like the most intuitive thing, like we have building blocks, you put together the building blocks, you understand the whole. But after Kumarila Bhatta, another great thinker, one of the greatest thinkers of this country, Prabhakara is also called Guru. Prabhakara came and said, look, that is not the case. It is actually Anvitabhidhana. That means Sentence is the primary unit at which meaning is understood. And words do not convey meaning directly, but once they are connected anvita with each other in the other sentence, meaning starts becoming clear. So it is the reverse process of what Kumarila Bhatta said. Mimamsa has both these positions. Okay. One is called Bhatta Madam, another is called Guru Madam. In Vyakarana, we say no, it is Vakyartha. Vakyartha, sentential meaning is what is understood, and not meanings of words or morphemes. Okay, this is also called Pratibha. Pratibha is a Buddhi Visesha. What is the meaning of Buddhi Visesha? Buddhi Visesha means a type of Buddhi. We saw that how cognizance, how we hold cognition happens, right? When we are cognizing a pot, our chitta is one aspect of the Buddhi, takes the form of the pot. So this Pratibha is one aspect of this Buddhi, or one form of this Buddhi, right? Which is taking the form of the Vakyartha. And that is what is important for us. We don't even worry about words at all. That is, Kumarila Bhatta says words are primary, and from words we build up the sentence meaning, like we put building blocks together. Then later Prabhakara came and said, Guru, no, sentence is the primary one, and words have a role only in their connection with other words in the sentence, right? And that they don't convey meaning directly. And Vyakarana is saying Vakyartha is only one which is understood. After that is one sentence understood, we don't even bother about the words. In fact, in the second kanda called Vakya Kanda, from 2.57 to 2.112, right? About 60 shlokas or 55 karikas, there is an extensive discussion on what is the meaning, how is meaning understood, taking up the views of Mimamsakas and criticizing them, and finally establishing that sentence alone is real and has only one meaning. Sentence doesn't have multiple meanings, right? After establishing that sentence alone is real and has one meaning, this is shown to be the Akhanda Vakyartha is shown to be Pratibha. We talked about Pratibha earlier, right? That it's an important concept here, but this Pratibha is what you say that, but Pratibha is our talent, right? You will see that talent is that which is able to catch as much meaning as is possible, right? And whatever your talent catches is your Akhanda Vakyartha. That's the reason why a more talented person, with more Pratibha can understand more meaning, where Shreyaji asked about it. That's the reason why I took up so much on that particular time on that question, right? That being the case, what is the reality of Varna, Pada and Vakya? Okay. In the Vakya Kanda, we see that first divisions of words into Padas are there. There is theory in Vyakarana that there are 4 kinds of words. Sometimes the 5th kind of word called Karma Pravachaniyas is also taken. They're explained. Then discussion on whether subsidiary elements in Pada are meaningful or not is taken. Okay. What is subsidiary elements in Pada? Pada has Varnas. Meenakshi ji was asking, look, Om is Eka Akshara, you're talking about Shabda. Shabda means she meant Pada. In Pada, there are Varnas. There could be Prachayas also, right? We have Ghai Prachaya, we have, or whatever, right? We know all the Prachayas. Su, Au, Jes, or whatever. Now, the discussion is whether these Prachayas and Varnas are meaningful. That is also taken up. And final Siddhanta is given that only Akhanda Vakyartha is real. That means not just Vakyartha, but Akhanda Vakyartha. You cannot further analyze a meaning of a Vakya. You cannot split it into further parts. Analyze in the Greek etymology means divide into parts. Synthesizes, put them together, right? So in Kumarila's Mata, we have the word meanings just synthesized, put together. But in Akhanda Vakyartha, we are saying that once Vakyartha is established, you cannot further divide it. It is Akhanda, not divided. Then what is the reality of these Prachayas, words, etc.? Oh, they are only Upayas. They are not real, right? In fact, Bhartavati says, you know what? In a different grammar, you can use different Prachayas. Let me explain this in some detail. You all know about the Vibhakti Prachayas, Su, Au, Jas, etc., right? That's the reason why they are called Suprachayas, because it starts with Su and then ends with Su. So we have Rama, Su, Ramaha, right? And Au, Rama, Au, Ramau. Rama, Jas, Ramaha. and so on and so forth. But there are other Vyakaranas where this sup is called not su but ru. There they say Rama ru Ramaha. And look at our grammarians, Pananiyas. So they have no problem. Oh, you don't want to use su, sir? It's okay. Both of us agree on the form Ramaha. As long as we agree on the form Ramaha, we have no attachment. We do not insist. We are not dogmatic that this Vibhakti Prachaya in Ramaha is su. Chandracharya is saying it is ru. Fine, it's okay. That's the reason why Bhartwati said in a different grammar, different prachayas could be used, because for us, prachayas are only upayas. Okay. Now, what is upaya? Upaya is a device. If I say upaya is a device, you will not understand the full force of that word. If I can use Telugu here, in Telugu there is a saying called Eru dati teppa tagaleyatam. People think that it is a wrong thing to do. But Eru means a stream, teppa is a raft kind of thing. So you cross the stream in a raft and then you burn the raft. Right? Why are you doing it, or whatever may be there? It is seen as some kind of kritagnata or whatever. But this raft is an upaya. Why? Raft is very unsafe. You are not supposed to cross these mighty streams in those small rafts kind of thing maybe. But the raft has its use only till you cross the stream. After that, it is so much of junk. And upaya is something similar. It is upadaya heyaha. Heyaha means give up. You take something and then you have no use for it. Such a thing is called upaya. It's like a scaffolding when you're building a building, right? When you're building, you require workers to go up the building. Therefore, you put up a scaffolding outside using iron rods or bamboos or whatever. And that has to be built before the building goes up, because the worker needs to go there. Similarly, when you're pouring a roof, you need a support under it called centering or whatever. But once the roof is done, once the building is done, the scaffolding has no use. It can be taken away and burnt. It's actually taken away and dismantled. Such a thing is upaya. Upaya is a device which has no use after the purpose is achieved. Prachayas and words are that. They are there only to help us understand the vakyartha. Once vakyartha is understood, they have no more use and we can happily burn them away. Bhartwari doesn't stop here. He says the entire Shastra, which is division of words into Prakriti, Prachaya, it does not teach reality at all. The reality is only Akhanda Vakyartha, which to attain that we use this Prakriti and Prachaya. In fact, we'll read the next Karika. Abheda Purvaka Abhedaha Kalpita Vakyavadivihi Abheda Purva Bheda Purva Anabhedanstu Manyate Padadarshinaha. Differences in the form of words are devised on the basis of non-difference within a sentence by the sentence proponents, that is Vyakaranas. On the other hand, the word proponents, Mimamsakas, hold the sentence as one on the basis of its differentiation into words. Okay, he is starting the discussion here, giving the relative positions of Vyakaranas and Mimamsakas, saying that Vakyavadibihi by Vyakaranas, the Bhedaha are Kalpitaha, right? Whereas the Padadarshinaha, the Mimamsakas, are Bhedapurvan, okay? They differentiate into words, sentence. But Padena Varnaha Vidyante. In a Pada, there are no Varnas. Varneshu Avayavanacha. And within a Pada, there are no Avayavas like Prachayas, letters, or half letters or whatever. Okay. Vakyat Padanam Atyantam Praviveko na Kaschana. It is in fact not possible to have a clear and final demarcation of words from a sentence. Right? Vakya alone is real, not padas or varnas. Further says, if you are asking me, then why are you teaching only about, this is called a Padashastra, right? Where you are teaching about Prachayas, there are, some 400 Prachayas and 2000 Dhatus and 4000 rules to combine this 2000 Dhatus with 400 Prachayas, that is Vyakarana. That means whatever you are teaching me is all unreal. He says, yes, there is a smiling face. In Shastra, avidya only is taught. Shastreshu prakriya bhedaihi avidya eva upavarnyate. Anagama vikalpatu swayam vidyopavartate. In Shastra, only avidya is taught. But true knowledge, without the imaginary constructs of Shastra, shines forth by itself once his avidya is destroyed. Right? See where we are going. We are talking about what are unreal here, which is the Varnas and Padas, but we cling on to them in Vyakarana while studying Vyakarana. And once we are able to rise above it, that's when Vidya, okay, Upavartate, that's when Vidya shines, right? So this is also kind of the Vyakarana Darsana, which is saying that while we deal with sentences and words and varnas, and while we have a very different way from the Mimamsakas, by understanding the ultimate truth of each one of them, we will be able to reach that Brahman and happily say with full conviction that every word means everything. In fact, Ramanuja says in his Bhashya that every word has purport in Brahman, right? So Jnanis know that. And if we focus enough, we'll also know this, right? And in terms of pedagogy, the idea is that true reality is taught through untrue devices. By device, we mean upaya. Upaya means something we have to throw away. Because there is no other way to teach the indescribable. This is indescribable is Brahman. This is stated explicitly by Vartvari, where he says, Upaya shikshamananam balanam apalalana. Okay? Asatye vartmani sthitva atha satyam samihate. The lay people who are being trained, these devices, that is Shastras, Upayas, are expedient ruses. Standing in the untrue path, the true path is being obtained. Truth is being obtained, right? You'll find a lot of similarities in Advaita, because there we have a similar kind of issue that this Brahman is Bhuman, it's indescribable, neither Manas nor Vak can reach, but we have to teach. So what happens? Avidyavad Vishayani Shastrani. Shankaracharya says in his Bhashya, in the opening itself, says that look, all these Shastras are full of avidya. But unfortunately, that is the only device available to us to teach. This goes to the extent where both Bhartrari and Shankara are saying that Veda itself is an upaya. Veda also has a limited purpose till you attain Brahman. After that, it is exactly like raft which was used to cross the stream, or the scaffolding which was used to build the building. Once Brahman is attained, it has no use. That's the reason why sannyasis remove their yajnopavita, they do not wear shikha, they are above Veda now. At least symbolically, only true sannyasis like Ramana Maharshi are like that. But even others, while they don't say it in so many words, they aspire to it by removing those signs. Right? With this, I'll take a pause and try to summarize this. We started the technical discussion and saw how the very same technicalities lead us to the philosophical issues, and how that pedagogy of teaching the true through the untrue, it holds good both at a Vyavahara level and a Paramartha level. Which is that we have no other go but to use these untrue Padas and Varnas. They are not real. But we have to resort to them to teach the true thing called the Vakyartha, which is a very abstract entity called Pratibha, which is how much of that meaning you catch, right? And it is that Shastra resorts to Avidya to teach this reality, including Veda, not just Vyakarana. In this brush, even Veda is included. Bhartwari says that in one of the Karikas, Tasya Praptyupayaha Veda, right, of this Sabdabrahman. The way to attain it is, the upaya is Veda for that. Okay, with that, I'll take a pause, 6:45. We are on time now. And Nitinji, do you want to read the questions?
I'm not sure where you left last time.
Okay.
I think you took Shreyaji's questions and also answered Meenakshiji's questions, I think.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so let me just read out. One of the questions is that the current explanation, yeah, I think it is in some particular context. The current explanation by Shivasena Garu only pertains to worldview or Vyavahara. The same cannot be ascribed to in the case of describing Brahma, as it is fact that Vyakarana language is what fails rather than the competence of the speaker listener. Is this correct understanding?
I think going by the timestamp, it is talking about the limitation of a Vyakti in understanding it. In understanding what you call the intended meaning. And what Krishna Chaitanya ji is saying is that, but when it comes to understanding Brahman, language fails, right? Rather than competence of the speaker or listener. It is very true that it's an established position that, in fact, in the earlier session also the same Vedic mantra was repeated. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. Language completely fails, and there is Vedic pramana for that, and that's absolutely right. But the way the question is framed, that is not in keeping with the Shishtachara traditions, right? We do not talk about Shastras, incompetence, right, or failure. Why? We are supposed to have a positive outlook towards this. Only with that positive outlook can we cultivate, a better understanding of Shastra, because they're very deep. So while the intent is absolutely right, I would prefer a slightly different wording of it. That yes, ultimately language fails, and when we say competence of the speaker or listener alone matters, we are really talking about the chitta suddhi of the sadhaka. Right? Everybody can learn Veda, everybody can learn the meaning of Veda and do some reflection upon that, but none of them will actually understand Brahman or reach Brahman. To be able to do that, we need to have this special quality where we need to be ready for the ripening. They say that, give the example of a fruit which ripens and it is now ready for falling. One has to reach that stage. So it is absolutely the competence or the quality of the sadhaka, no doubt about it. And again, we don't talk about faults of Shastra as such. Shastra is there only to help us to the extent it can help. It itself is saying, Shastra Bhartrihari himself has said, right? Look, Veda is an upaya, the Shastra is an upaya. And we cannot really take you there. All that we can try to do is that being situated in the untrue path, right? We can help you attain the truth.
Yes, you're still saying something?
No, we can go to the next one, I guess.
Okay. So the next question is basically about the position on Ishvara between Vedanta and Mimamsa. So is the difference between them, perhaps you could highlight a bit on this.
Okay. Is it right to say that while Ishvara is more or less non-competent as per Mimamsa, Vedanta places him as karma phala pradata? Is this the only difference between Vedanta and Mimamsa as far as Ishvara is concerned? If yes, is it something that can be really termed as a difference, given that he's again pradata of karma phala, of the karma performed, which again Mimamsa says is automatically bestowed? What exactly makes Ishvara more potent in Vedanta view than Mimamsa school? This is actually out of syllabus for us because we're talking about Sphotavada and there's nothing to do with it. But I'll do my best because I did touch upon this myself. And I believe Sphotavada is one form of Vedanta. Therefore, this is that way we can kind of bring it into the purview of the discussion. Sir, to answer this very simply, if Lord Krishna has anugraha on anyone, he can override all the karma that we have done. In fact, when we read Bhagavatam, the Ajamila Upakyanam and other things, this is what Purana is telling us repeatedly, right? Even at the time of dying, one simply says Narayana, 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 we get the phala. So, omnipotent Ishvara in Vedanta is that he can override everything with his anugraha. Whereas in Mimamsa, he cannot do, therefore, he is not merely non-competent, he is impotent as far as Mimamsakas are concerned. That's a very big difference as far as Ishvara is concerned. Right? That Ishvara is omnipotent in Vedanta and Vyakarana, is impotent in Mimamsa.
And the next question is Pratibha Akhanda Vyakarta the Abhidha Artha?
Before that, Lakshma Reddy question is there, sir. He is not Uttara Mimamsa dealing with Jnana Kanda, which is similar to Vyakarana.
I mean, it's okay. You don't need to have to take it chronologically.
Sure.
You can answer anything first. Yeah.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Is Pratibha Akhanda Vakyartha the Abhidha Artha? Ma'am, I believe by Abhida Artha, you are referring to what we spoke earlier about Alankara Shastra having three modes or three what do you call paradigms of meaning connotation, Abhida, Lakshana, and Vyanjana. If that is the case, this is not merely Abhida, but all Artha, right? Whether it be Abhida, Lakshana, or Vyanjana. All of that contains the Akhanda Vakyartha. So, when we say Leela Kamala Patrani Ganaya Masa Parvati, why we will take only Abhida Artha? The Vakyartha is that Parvati is shy and curious, and that is the Vyangyartha, right? So, Pratibha and Akhanda Vakyartha absorbs all the Artha, not merely the Abhida part.
And you can take up the Lakshma Reddy's question. Is not
Yes,
Uttara Mimamsa dealing with Jnanakanda, which is similar to Vyakarana?
Absolutely, yes, sir. That is totally true. That in Uttara Mimamsa or Vedanta, we are dealing with the Jnanakanda Upanishads part of it. The only contention is that I am sort of guilty of highlighting only those parts of Vyakarana, because we specifically said this is Vyakarana Darsana, right? But Vyakarana focuses on a lot of Prakriya as well. So if we go to somebody and say Vyakarana is like Vedanta, we'll get physical looks. When we highlight the Vyakarana Darshana, yes, it deals with Brahman exactly like Vedanta does. But just like Purvamimamsa deals with the Karma Kanda, bulk of Vyakarana's concern is the Karma Kanda. Because it is talking about, how do I interpret the Veda, right? In various karmas. So we need to keep that in mind. But yes, Vyakarana Darshana is like Vedanta dealing with Jnanakanda.
I think you mentioned about how in Mimamsa the alternatives are not preferred. I think
Yes.
that has also got to do with the subject of its inquiry, namely the karmas. If too many alternatives are there in how a ritual is performed, then that leads to a lot of confusion and problems. So they try to understand what exactly is the vidhi, how the Veda says it has to be done, because only when it is done in that way that the set phala, swarga or whatever it is, will come out of it. Is this what you think also?
I don't know how to formulate that. The question is, why do Mimamsakas not like Vikalpa? Right? And the answer lies elsewhere actually. Okay. The answer lies in actually the question of Shreyaji. What do we mean by this? See, Mimamsakas have this notion that one Shabda will have one Artha and this relation is fixed. Okay. Vikalpa is a direct contradiction of this. How can Veda as a corpus, as a Shabda, have two Arthas? See, for example, there is one particular yajna called Atiratra. Okay? Natiratre, Shodasam Grunhati. There is a patra called yajna patra called Shodasam. Okay? One Vedic sentence says you should have the Shodasha in Atiratra yajna. Another says don't do it. Okay? Now, Mimamsaka doesn't like such situations. Why? For him, Shabda should have anartha. Shabda can be more than Pada and Vakya, right? This entire Veda is one Shabda. How can it have two meanings, right? His entire issue is that one Shabda should have one Artha. Now you'll come back and says, what will Mimamsaka do with Gaunartha or Bhaktam or Lakshana? Oh, they accept Lakshana. For Mimamsakas, Vyanjana is a part of Lakshana. But the key part is, Veda is divided by Mimamsakas into Vidhi and Arthavada and a few other sentences. And in Vidhi, Lakshana does not apply. What it means is, as far as law is concerned, only what is stated in the law applies. You cannot have secondary meaning. You cannot have Mukhyartha in law. Such a law is defective. So in Veda, in any Vidhi Vakya, Lakshana cannot apply. Once Lakshana cannot apply, Abhida is a one-to-one mapping. When there is a one-to-one mapping, there cannot be a Vikalpa. Now, can this also be put in the way Nitinji said? Yes, maybe we can. But the Shastra Paddhati is that Vikalpa is not like by Mimamsa, because for Vidhi Vakyas, Lakshana is not admitted, only Abhida is admitted. And for Abhida, there is a one-to-one mapping. And Vikalpa is does violence to this concept of fixed mapping. I hope this makes clear. I mean, incidentally, if you ask a Nayayika in the same Shodashi, what should we do in Athiratra Yajna? Nayayika gives another logic. He says, Adhikasya adhikam phalam. If Veda is saying you may or may not, please do take. Because maybe if you have one more patra, you might get more merit out of it. See how different Shastras interpret the same situation.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I think we have 2 more questions and then we can conclude. The question is, can Shastra be equated with Upaya as far as Mumukshu is concerned once he attains moksha?
I think he answered the question in the next query. Yes, indeed, Shastra is Upaya.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So final question, can sutras be called rules?
Again, if we want to split hairs, right, Sutra should be called Sutra only, right? Because in Sutra, the key part is that it is Alpakshara. Whereas in a rule, clarity is the important one. So when we say Sutras are rules, what we are really doing is that Sutra Vritti is the rule, right? What do we mean by Sutra Vritti? For every Sutra, usually we write a Vritti below that. That means, if for example, Panini says Eko Anachi is a Sutra. Okay? Or Badrayana says Tattu Samanvayat. This by itself might not give full meaning, therefore we expand by supplying the necessary words. Usually a very respected commentator does it, like Patanjali or Shankaracharya or Bhattoji Dikshita or Haradatta or whatever, right? Whoever does it. That vritti is considered to be just an expansion of this sutra. If we can accept sutra to include its vritti, then yes, they can be rules, called rules. In fact, in Ashtadhyayi, they are called rules of grammar. And there are different kinds of rules. That extent, yes, sutras are given only because they are laying down something. They're completely, it's okay to call them rules in that sense. But there is a difference where rules are not alpaksharas, sutras are alpaksharas. They are very concise. They omit a lot of words. They are there for ease of remembrance. Whereas rules are explicit and they try to be as clear as possible. The way we use the word, that is the only difference. I think we are done with all the questions as well. The questions are very intriguing and thought-provoking. Thank you for the questions, and thank you all for taking out time to listen to this and engage in this. And of course, thank you to Nitinji and Indica Forum. We'll meet again tomorrow, 11 o'clock, right? Nitinji, you seem to be on mute.
Not hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Okay. So I was just telling that to the viewers that if you have missed today's morning session, we'll soon upload it on YouTube. You can watch it. And current session is already being live streamed on YouTube. You can watch that also. So that tomorrow when you come, you'll be better. If you have missed this, then you will have the introduction part. So with this, we'll conclude this session. Sivasenani ji, any final?
One second. Somebody was asking whether there are any books. Okay. I don't know what is the intent of that, in the sense that is madam referring to any books written by me, or she wants his reference books on this topic. So I'm just leaving my email ID here. All right. I would request participants to please direct questions with clarity there. Right. I hope that's okay, Nitinji.
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
So even if I send something here, ma'am, it might, not appear later. Therefore, if you can note my email ID, then I can kind of, if your intention is to know what books are required to know more about this, I can do. But if your intention is whether I wrote anything, I'm a very lazy person. I have not written much. I have one paper.
I think in the next session, you could include a slide with some suggestions to the books about the philosophy of Vyakarana. In the next session, you can include a slide, Sivasenani.
I mean, my only issue is I can give a big bibliography. I have it ready actually. but different people in different stages have different requirements, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, you perhaps could share a beginner level
Annotated
verse.
bibliography, yeah. I'll
Yes.
write that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So with this, we conclude this session. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter for more updates about our activities. See you tomorrow morning at 11 a.m.